Thank you, and thank you. If I get lost in my thoughts, I apologize in advance. That was a complete surprise. Thank you. Well, you heard about a scintillating presentation this morning. This won't be one this afternoon. Board work isn't what makes Broadway, but it's absolutely necessary, and I want to thank those who have served and who will serve, and congratulations to those who have been and will be elected. And when we talk about the Board of Directors, the written report or printed reports, page 383, 384, if you don't want to look at my kindergarten slides that I'm putting up here. And so what are we as a Board of Directors? Well, we relate to the President Bishop as president. In other words, we hear this said at Synod headquarters sometimes, and it's the same at a district level. We're kind of the English District, Inc., Incorporated. That's really what we're looking at. We don't ignore the ecclesiastical side, and we certainly deal with people, and we deal with congregations and ministries, but we are the business side of things, and that's what makes it so exciting. We have several members of the Board of Directors who are here, and if you have been serving this last triennium on the board, and as you see in my report, there's quite a bit of turnover. But if you have served, I'd ask you to please stand in your place. This was a board, as we gathered, that board-wise, I'm not speaking vice president-wise, but board-wise, many of these people were coming in without prior district board experience, and the several turnovers and resignations and so forth during the year only added to that. So it became a bit of a wild ride, but it was good. We do thank you. As you know, we are at least currently at the 3-year and 3-term limits, and most of the board was able to go on. We had a couple who were term limited, and one of us who chose not to run. So what is the purpose of this board? Well, the board, to say it in kind of an uninteresting way, is the English district between conventions. And the board really does take up the matters of the district, of the ministries of the district, and also of the president and staff. These are hard acts to follow, all these emotional things. But I, too, on behalf of the board of directors, want to thank the district staff. Some were at the meetings at the call of the president, some were not. They were keeping the shop running, and sometimes commission workers were out visiting and so forth. But I, too, on behalf of the board, wish to thank them. Our purpose is then, and we're going to go into some specifics here in just a moment, but that purpose is to do the business to keep the district running. And that involves communication with you, it involves working and cohesively with the president, and it then is also sometimes bringing about specific kinds of actions. The process that we have used since 1997 is called the Carver model, but it's the kind of model that sets up a strong president or chief ecclesiastical officer, and the board needs to leave him alone to conduct business and to lead his staff. But then it's a policy governance model where we establish policies, and then we turn it over to the CEO, Chief Ecclesial Officer, and he carries out those policies and the governance. And we give oversight to that, and we adopt measures that will best effect that. We are, by bylaw, to meet 4 times a year, and one of those 4 meetings we call a virtual meeting. Some of the members think the others are virtual meetings also. But anyway, that one we do electronically, and that's the January meeting, so that saves hard travel. And then we can conduct business electronically as well, and that's as legitimate and legal as being in person. I am humbly proud to say that at least in the 15 years that I've been on this and served the board and served you, we have dedicated about 10% of every meeting for scripture and devotions and prayer. And when you consider that our meetings are, give or take, 10 hours, that's a wonderful and a very healthy amount of time. I have talked to other boards and other districts and so forth and so on, and you know, I'm very happy that we have chosen to, and we share that, by the way. All the members of the board are invited to share in a devotional activity. Sometimes they share it within a meeting. They may take all of them in one meeting, but and believe me, I don't have to tell you, but that makes a big difference in what we do. Some of the particulars, and I'm not going to run down the whole job description and try to bring you 3 years and 30 minutes, but I do want to speak specifically because this might be so exciting that you'll run for the board in 3 years. I mean, who knows? And I hope, but seriously, I hope you'll think about that. We're always, that whether it's clergy, commissioned, laity, we're always seeking people who will take these positions and serve in this way, and it's so important. Ends and means. Some of us maybe still think of this in terms as you know, goals and objectives. We won't let nomenclature get in the way, but one of the first responsibilities the board does each triennium is to gather and say, well, what's going to be, what will be priorities in this coming triennium, in these coming 3 years? And those are developed, and this time, partly because of the newness of the board, probably because of the chair, partly because of people coming and going, but it took us a little longer to finally get at this time. I'm very pleased with what the final product was, but and these are some basic statements saying these are the ends. This is where we want to end up, or where we want to get and then go on. So that's kind of like a goal. And then, when we agree on that, we hand it to the president and say, now you put some objectives, you put means behind that. Processes, procedures, and so forth. Not policies, that's ours, but carry out those ends or those goals. Policies. In a sense, each time, not just vote, I don't mean voting for officers or something like that. And by the way, the board, you're about to elect board members, and then at the first meeting in August, the board will elect its chair and its vice chair. But aside from those kinds of things, basically, anytime we say we move an item, an issue, and make a decision on that, that in a sense becomes policy. We also have some other policies that you know, are more obviously designated that way. One thing that happened in this last triennium is we took additional time, and we have sometimes, to really look at the board of directors' policies. And we have policies for ourselves, how we behave, and how we relate to the president, and what we need to be doing, and so on and so forth. And we took good time on that, and so those, I think, in some areas were simplified, and other areas were clarified, but it was done very well, and we're happy with that. An example of that is, Laverne mentioned a little earlier about something that's actually going to carry over to the next triennium, and that's funding, scholarship funding, and so forth. But we did set up a model here for our district for the parameters for missional funding, and so that what happens, of course, is that we get to something. It may be new, or maybe it hasn't happened for, let's say, 4 or 5 years. And okay, how do we make this decision? On what basis do we make the decision? And I think you know this from your work or from your churches. Well, this feels good today, so we'll do this. And then you look at that a couple of years later when you get a similar thing coming, and then you say, well, how does this look or feel? Well, we need to back up from that and establish policies so that we can approach each similar kind of thing the same way. And I think we made some good progress on that, and I know the upcoming board will continue that and improve on that. What happens, in other words, what I'm saying with the policies is you establish something that you can look at and be guided by. If you don't like it, you can rewrite it. But it gets away from making knee-jerk decisions when you come up to something. We deal with the other, that's right, parochial concerns. And what do we mean by this? Well, it was mentioned, we have the committee that reviews constitutions, bylaws. Those kinds of things come to us when a church wishes to be received into the district. And finally, the board of directors passes on those things or sometimes sends them back for more work. We're concerned when churches request to be brought in. Sometimes it's by transfer from another district. Sometimes it's a group of people who wish to affiliate, begin a congregation, a ministry, and affiliate with the English district, and we consider that. Sometimes it's churches or other ministries that are asking to be released from membership in the English district, and we take action on that, and all of these things have happened in these last 3 years, and some are still in process. So those are the kind of parochial concerns. Since he often has to be, not you, Wayne, the next guy up the pole, that guy in the back, since he's often the guy who has to come across at you, kind of like, we wish you would do this, I'm going to second something that was said earlier, and this comes from the board, because the board members have been actively out there trying to get responses. We need your statistical information. And Synod needs it more than we do. And if Synod doesn't receive it, there will be consequences. This sounds so, well, it is kind of threatening. Leading into next year's convention. I mean, they just need your statistical report. Please do it. Please do it. It's simpler. It's so much simpler today than it was years ago. Just do it. And then you can be represented and be part of that. Your pledges to the district. I'm happy to talk to anyone about any of these 3 issues. Secondly is the pledges. Think about that and think about it as love gifts. Think about it as part of your total stewardship life. Think about it as our, we love to say it, walking together, and consider that. And then also delegates. It's a little late to talk about bringing delegates to the to the convention today. But, and there are many more. Our board met 6 weeks ago, and I developed a list of the churches that didn't have delegates coming, and I needed a couple of pages. And then I assigned it to the board. I said, go get them. So I hope at least a few people are here maybe because of that. And I did a little work in my own circuit, and I hope others did too. So those are those kind of concerns. Fiduciary responsibilities, that's certainly a high priority on any board of directors. We look very closely. We are very blessed with the reports and the information and the clarity we receive from Sally. And so we make use of that, and you've seen that up on the screen, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with that. That is a responsibility of the board. I mean, if you want to narrow it down to 2 or 3 things we have to do, this is one of those things we have to do. So there again, we do appreciate the gifts that come in. We do appreciate the pledges that are made, and that really helps us to plan for this. The other thing with your statistical reports, by the way, is very early in this coming triennium, the board is going to need to sit down and figure out electoral circuits for the next Synod convention. And if we used to say, well, whatever they said last year we'll use, but Synod's saying, no, you're not. If there's nothing in, that becomes a 0. So I plead with you, again, on behalf of the next board. The boundaries. That's that's heart and soul of policy governance. But we need to stay out of his stuff, and he needs to let us do our stuff. It's kind of as simple as that. Part of the policy for the board of directors, one whole section is on limitations, presidential limitations. For instance, he can't propose a budget that's completely is not balanced, is completely out of whack, and he can't just be bringing in churches without running to bias or things like that. And so he has to respect what we have a responsibility to do. On the other hand, trust me, we let him do the ecclesiastical side of that, and that is not board work. I mean, is there a little blurring sometimes? Of course there is, because we're talking about people and ministries and congregations. But the presidium has the responsibility for that, and we let them do their work. It's the president, the 4 vice presidents, and the secretary, and we allow them to carry on their work. The bylaws. I've referenced these. We do review them regularly, and I know I'm pretty sure there's still one resolution coming to the floor that affects those bylaws. What happens is, even as they are part of Synod, we become Synod officers in a sense. Certainly we're the under Synod authority as board of directors. And so we can't do things in our bylaws that conflict with Synod's bylaws. And so when we want to change something in our bylaws, we take it, we bring it past the CCM, Commission on Constitutional Matters of Synod, and then they'll tell us if it's good to go or not, and then so we work on that. And certainly, I know it's kind of bedtime reading if you can't get to sleep, but maybe once a triennium, just look at them, because there's a lot of good ideas out here that never get to a board because you're not at the table and so on and so forth. But I do encourage you to give that some thought. The Corporate Operations Manual, I won't even suggest you look at this, but it's an important manual. It deals with the elected officers of the district, the appointed staff. We're talking about job descriptions. We're talking about succession in office, something that's going on this year that we made revisions to several years ago. It talks about the board of directors. That's where our policies are. Committee for Stewardship, the district archivist, the Committee on Nominations and Contracting Policies, the Endowment Fund, which we'll speak about in a moment. And so within this, this also is reviewed. I mean, this is becomes a legal document, and it has a lot of legal things in there that we don't refer to a whole lot if we're not changing them. But this is vital for that. And one of the areas in here we lovingly just refer to as the Canada Corp. And you have to be around a while to have any idea what we're talking about. And it's not even the Canada Corporation. It's the English District of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, parentheses, Canada Corporation. And since we are in that great country to the north, as well as this country in which we are sitting, we have to have a number of different separate items, as Sally has explained. The Canada Corporation is a group of leaders in Canada, also our district officers, our executives, and who meet, and they become kind of a mission council, if you will, for Canada. They are that which kind of brings the churches together on common needs, concerns, and visions. And they also then within that have the Canadian Church Extension Fund. And because of banking rules and so forth, you have to have different ones in the different countries. So when you hear that Canada Corporation, that's all part of that too. The transitions, we mentioned take place, and so we try to have some overlap. I will be with the board at its first meeting, unless they tell me to cancel my flight, and try to get them up and running and so forth and get that. But we do try to stay aware of the transitions that are going on in ministries as well, so that we're not just focused on churches or schools or just something or one type of worker, but we're into that all. And finally, the Endowment Fund, the English District Endowment Fund, And Pastor Fred Gerlach is going to come up and pitch it, and then I'm going to tell you what he talked about.
John, you can stay right there. Fred, why don't you take this mic?
Okay.
Christ is risen.
He is risen indeed.
I had to change the pace there. My name is Pastor Fred Gerlach. I'm the pastor of Bethany Evangelical Lutheran Church in Trenton, New Jersey. We are also a mission church of the English District. I was nominated to the board about a year and a half ago, and I'm going to be hopefully elected this term. And the reason I'm speaking on behalf of the board is to encourage you to look at the endowment fund in two perspectives. As a mission church, we have an outreach to urban communities. Primarily for us, it's the Liberian community. Just to give you an idea of the impact that a fund like this makes and the grants that the English District provides for us is 7 years ago, I had a young woman named Hawa, a Muslim who had 3 children. And because of the funding that we received, we were able to begin an after-school program, and she put her 3 children into that program. And over the next 2 years, Hawa and her children began to study the catechism with me. And we developed a close relationship. We've helped her move several times, helped her find a job, get her into job training programs, things like that. Impacting a person's life. So that after 2.5 years, she was catechized and confirmed into our church as an active member of our community, and her children go to Christian schools and are active in our youth program. Absolutely. It's the work of the Holy Spirit. And so I encourage you to go home and reflect in your own congregations how you can make a difference in your community. And I'm here also not only as a delegate and a candidate, but I'm here as a resource, having been serving in the urban center now for 10 years. It's very challenging, but it's such a beautiful thing to have people come to Christ who have very little hope and very little direction in their lives. And I want to encourage each and every one of you to do that. The endowment fund is blessed with monies. We use a portion of the income each year that we received to fund these new missions. And so if you have some concepts or thoughts and you'd like to run them by me, I invite you to please do that while I'm here. The second part of that, of course, is continuing to fund the endowment. You can't have an ignited mission for Christ unless you're able to fuel the fire. And as President Harrison said eloquently, you need some funds to do that. St. Paul delivered funds to the Church of Jerusalem so that the mission could continue to grow and to benefit the people that were there, so that people could see Christ in our ability to help. So again, reflect on how your congregation could designate some funds to the endowment fund so that we can bring other people to Jesus Christ in our hometowns and around the world. God bless you, and praise the Lord.
Just share a few of the things from the policy that governs this. The overall objective is to be good stewards of the financial resources the Lord has provided through the endowment fund and to manage endowment assets in order to optimize the fund's total return in the context of its risk profile. And I won't get into all that fancy language there. We have a target return for each year, and the endowment fund and all of the work that when he mentioned board, he meant the board of managers for the endowment fund. All that they do then comes to the board of directors, who has the final say-so and the final authority over that. But the board of managers are authorized to use an outside financial advisor for the fund. And what are these funds? Well, the funds that come in, obviously, are the investments. There's also a lot of money that the board has chosen to put into that fund to hold for specific purposes, so that ups the amount of return. So earnings are defined as dividends and interest and other income prior to the year's undistributed income, And then a percentage of appreciation of assets may be reviewed and modified by the Board of Managers periodically. And so it's an ongoing process to review what the dividends are and how much will be made available. Again, over a course of a couple of meetings during this triennium, the board has spent good time in saying, what about the distribution of these funds? It wasn't many years ago when we didn't have enough money in there to really care, because there weren't funds there to distribute. Now that there is a very healthy amount in there, we have determined that up to 5% of board-designated funds and earnings may be used for various grants, and we're looking at certain percentages in particular areas, such as human care, disaster relief, new missions, scholarships, church worker debt reduction, campus ministry, and then other ministries, and so forth and so on. I won't, again, not all the details. But what we're saying is, this is an example of setting a policy so that when we do have the dividends, we can say, well, we've got this percentage to use for a new mission start, like we just heard, or to help a particular area of ministry. And they are there, and we want to use them, and not just to have them be there. Who's on the fund? Well, you're about to elect members to that board of managers. And in addition to the people whom you elect as the treasurer of the district, there's one member that the board of directors elects or appoints to serve, and a representative of the Canada Corporation, and then the district president. So it's about 8, 9 people. They're voting members, and you will be working on that later on. And within that, there's also an executive committee. Again, they study the investments. We are now able to invest in a variety of different ways. Not too many years ago, we were limited to LCEF. That's one of them, but it's not restricted to that. So the investments are there. They are reviewed. They go to the board of managers, and then they come to the board of directors. And the managers do report to the board on a regular basis. Well, as this board concludes its work, on behalf of our board of directors, we want to say thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for reading the reports that we printed and sent out to you. Thank you for your ideas and suggestions. Thank you for your prayers and your encouragement. So let's tell everyone what he has done. To God be the glory forever.
Dr. Steve, thank you very much for the report of the Board of Directors.